And let me welcome you to our series for academic leaders that UMD leads successfully through challenging times. I'm Sophie Oberstein from the Center for Leadership and Organizational Change, known as CLOC. I'm here today with my colleagues, the Director of CLOC, Laura Scott, and the Associate Director, Adrian Hansky-Wicker, and you'll hear more from both of them later on in today's session. We are recording this morning's session for those who couldn't attend in person. As we get started, if you can open your chat, you'll be using that a couple times during this morning's session, and you can introduce yourself by telling us your department or where you're located when we are on campus. That would be terrific. We created this series because we are indeed in challenging times, and sometimes we need to remember some of the things that got us through and were effective when we weren't in these challenging times to guide us, and sometimes we need some additional strategies and skills when we have such a complicated context like we have now, when we have a pandemic, when we're reacting to systematic inequality, when we have unemployment rates, decreasing budgets, uncertainty. Sometimes it's nice to just have a quick reminder of some of the things that can get us through. And we also want to thank all of you for, in the middle of all of this uncertainty and upheaval, making the time to come and make this commitment to your own ongoing development and support. Some of you have made that commitment over and over again by coming to not just today's, but maybe 2, 3, or even all 4 of our sessions. And I'm curious how many you've been to. So also in the chat right now, if this is your 4th session, go ahead and type 4 or all. If this is your 3rd, if it's your 2nd, or even if it's your 1st, we welcome you. I'm curious. Okay, so a couple of you are here, several of you are here for your 4th session. You've been with us all the way through. We really appreciate that. And some of you are here for your 3rd. Thanks for sharing that with us. The tools that we're using in these challenging times are not necessarily specific to these times. We've actually created this series, focused this series around Gallup's 4 needs of followers, which is just an effective way of showing up as a leader at all times. It's based on a 2005 to 2008 study by the Gallup organization with a random sample of over 10,000 people from all sectors of employment. And what Gallup did was ask these people to think about a leader who had the most positive influence on their daily life. And then once they had that person in mind, to think about 3 words to describe what that leader gave them. And in analyzing all the words, which were offered kind of not off of a multiple choice list, but randomly provided, they found commonality and agreement among 4 particular words. Those words were trust, compassion, stability, and hope. And those became Gallup's 4 needs of followers framework. They are the topics of the 4 sessions that we've had thus far. If this isn't your 4th session and you missed one of these and are interested, we also will be sending you links to all of the sessions, or a place where you can get all of the sessions at the end of this workshop this morning. These 4 are not in any particular order. None is more important than any other, and there is some overlap between them. In fact, last week when we were talking about stability, we started to bleed a little bit into hope, and we'll fill out those thoughts in today's session. So some of you were here last week and may have come up with an intention for yourself of how you might create some stability or tame the turbulence in yourself or among your colleagues in the past week. If you did, we would love to celebrate your successes with you, your accomplishments, so please feel free to respond to this question in the chat at any time. How have you tamed the turbulence in the past week? Today's focus is hope. The way this the structure works in these sessions is that I talk generally about the concept for about 15 minutes, and then I turn the conversation over to Laura and Adrian, who flesh the concept out a little bit more and talk about how it fits in with the context that we're dealing with in these times. We also have time at the end of the session to respond to your questions, and we get your questions from the chat. Feel free to put your questions into the chat at any point during the session. I will scan them when we get to that point at the end of the session. So we really want to be responsive to whatever is on your mind and the questions that you have. We're also going to be sending you a copy of these slides after today's sessions, which can just help you determine how closely you need to follow in taking your own personal notes. So we thought we'd start with a different kind of question today, and just ask you, I've asked you today for a lot of different numbers in that chat box, but here's another number we'd like to know. On a scale from 1 to 5, how hopeful do you think your colleagues are right now? And a 5 would be full of hope, or as Laura described it when we were coming up with the scale, to the moon. The sky's the limit. And 1, I loved her wording, said, 1 is take me out with the trash. I'm feeling hopeless. So on a scale from 1 to 5, how hopeful do you think your colleagues are right now? Go ahead and type some responses in the chat. So far I'm seeing a lot of right in the middle of the scale, 3s. And when you're not in the middle of the scales, I'm seeing you at hopeless and on the lower end of the scale. Although Bonnie points out that the answer would depend on the colleague's classification. Yeah, so from our little anecdotal study that we just conducted in the chat, you know, we see the importance of addressing hope in these times. People are not feeling particularly hopeful, at least from what we're sensing. So we're going to talk today about some strategies around creating hope. But first of all, we want to share with you the definition we're using for hope as we talk today. Because we want to make sure it's clear that we think of hope as a state of optimism about the future, but as also something that's active. It's not just believing in a better future, but it's also being a part of that better future and a part of making that better future possible. Because hope is both a noun and a verb, if you're a grammarian, you know that a verb needs an object. A verb needs something, an object to move towards. And so the first thing about creating hope is about creating a future state, a desired future state. It's harder to just generally be hopeful or be optimistic without something to be hopeful about. So what is your target? And this framework comes from C.R. Schneider, who is a researcher at the University of Kansas. And he created an adult hope scale that measures a cognitive model of hope. And it includes 2 components that you need to feel hopeful. One is to have goals, to have a desired future state to aim for. And the other is to have pathways, to see different ways that you could get there. So a couple of words I want to highlight in here, because it says desired future state, to me this says this has to be a goal that everybody who's going towards it is desirous of, which means maybe you've involved the people in setting the goal with you. It's become a collaborative process of goal setting. So creating a desired future state and making sure that there are some ways that you could possibly achieve that goal. There are 2 additional ways, in addition to collaborative goal setting, that we wanted to talk about this morning to cultivate hope. One is utilizing optimistic language. The other is utilizing our strengths. Why optimistic language? Why optimism? Actually, it's surprising, at least to me, that there is research and evidence that says that optimism is important. There's a 30-year Mayo Clinic study that says optimistic people live about 19% longer than pessimists, which the study authors said, you know, tells us that mind and body are linked, and attitude has an impact even on the final outcome, death. If you live longer by being optimistic, attitude can have that much of a significant impact. On another type of study, MetLife Insurance Company tried an experiment in hiring for optimism, using optimism as a screening characteristic when hiring new agents. And after doing this, they found that the optimistic agents that they hired sold 60% more than the pessimistic agents and increased the market share of the insurance market by almost 50%. All in all, to paraphrase Dr. Martin Seligman, who's known as the father of positive psychology, optimism can prevent helplessness, and helplessness weakens your immune system. Without helplessness, your immune system can be in better shape. The word he actually uses, you can keep your immune defenses feistier. However, it's one thing to say optimism is great, but it's really difficult to just become optimistic, to just decide, okay, I'm going to think or I'm going to feel optimistic. So Dr. Mitchell Perry, who's written a book called The Road to Optimism, Change Your Language, Change Your Life, suggests that if you can't instantly change how you think or feel about the situation, you can address the third point on this behavior triangle here and change the way you say things. That changing the way you say things can lead to a change in the way you think or feel about them. We all know this as the fake it till you make it school of behavior change. Start acting a certain way, start speaking a certain way, and maybe it will filter into your brain. In other words, Mitchell suggests it's often our language that keeps us pessimistic. How can we be optimistic, he asks, if we're constantly speaking about what is missing? Dr. Perry suggests replacing negative, exclusionary language with positive, inclusive language at all times. Most pessimistic language talks about what isn't there, about absences, deficits. As he writes, it focuses on the holes, the exclusion, rather than the cheese, the inclusion. This chart shows us several ways that we can change our language in an effort to change how we think or feel. And it isn't easy. It's not even easy for a day, an hour. I tried it for a week, and it was rather challenging. Even I just said it isn't easy. I should have said it is difficult. You know, we're in a world which really does focus on using the negative language, saying no trespassing, as opposed to trespassing affects the wildlife in this area. Or don't forget your keys. No, remember your keys. Tell us what you want us to do. Don't tell us what you don't want us to do. The last item on this list leads us to our next strategy for conveying hope, which is utilizing our own and our team members' strengths rather than compensating for our weaknesses. In the early 1990s, educational psychologist Donald Clifton asked, what would happen if we studied what is right with people? Instead of focusing on where they have gaps or weaknesses, what would happen if we focused on what was right with people? And from that very simple origin, that very simple question, Gallup has been studying strengths for almost 30 years and has found that people who use their strengths in their work every day have a better quality of life and are more engaged in work. And some other statistics here are less likely to quit their jobs. Additionally, a focus on strengths has been espoused by many people, including Peter Drucker, who said one should waste as little effort as possible on improving areas of low competence It takes far more energy to improve from incompetence to mediocrity than it takes to improve from first-rate performance to excellence. So when we are investing in our shoring up our weaknesses, we come to a certain level of maybe fair or adequate performance. But when we can go to that, and we expend a lot of energy and resources in that, we can often expend fewer resources investing in the areas where we are very strong to become exceptional or great. And what you can find in the book, Good to Great, the ripple effect of someone who is really exceptional at someone throughout an organization is far greater than the ripple effect, the positive ripple effect of someone who is just good at it or just okay at it. UMD has made a significant investment in helping over 2,500 faculty and staff identify their strengths in the past 5 years. And I think Laura and Adrian will talk more about that. But it's especially important to focus on strengths now in these times because we tend to abandon our strengths focus in times like these when we're in survival mode, when we're doing whatever it takes to survive. And we often leave our employees floundering because what it takes to survive is not an area that they're strong in. It's in their area of weakness. At the same time, there's an ability to focus on strengths right now because we have some opportunity in front of us. There is some momentum to be paying more attention to people's health and well-being, to being more human and more flexible in workplaces. We are actually in a rare moment when examining how people get their work done and how they have autonomy over when and where they do their work is acceptable. It's kind of a topic for discussion. It is a time to try some big things that play into team members' strengths. So how can we do that right now? Well, especially when I said that, you know, we tend to just dive into whatever we need to do to survive, maybe it's time to backtrack and have some conversations with our colleagues to see whether they feel like they're utilizing their strengths, to ask them how they can work differently to add value in these times, and to try to find projects that play into their strengths, including ones that, you know, you've had in the back of your mind or on the back burner for a while and haven't had an opportunity to work on. Maybe there is, in some cases, some slowdowns that you can fill with doing some of those wish projects that you haven't been able to do before that would let people contribute their own strengths. And also, as I said, we have some experience with this on this campus. So contacting our team to learn more about the Gallup-Clifton strengths is another first step for how to focus on strengths. So I want to turn this conversation about how to use optimistic, positive language, how to set collaborative goals, and how to capitalize on strengths over to Laura and Adrian, who are going to add some further detail and relate it to our time.
Hi, everybody. I want to kick this off with a quote I found from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and I'm going to put it into the chat. He said, "We must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope." And I like that because it allows me to think about the disappointment that I might be feeling is here right now, but trying to find some infinite hope allows me to sort of look farther out onto the horizon. So I think when we feel hopeless, we tend to get myopic and very focused. And I think we can act too quickly. So to sort of slow ourselves down, to get ourselves out of that amygdala hijack place so that we are not operating from a place of threat, but we are operating from a place of hope is really important. Something else that I'd like to talk about is that one of the jobs of leaders is that we need to seed hope. So one of our jobs is to seed hope within the people and the organizations that we lead. So we need to be able to provide that to the future so that we can give those people in our world hope that we can achieve that. You're on mute, Laura.
Couldn't even find my my screen for a second. Thank you, Adrienne, for starting us off. Adrienne started us off because Adrienne is our internal hope organ. She is the one who pumps blood into us collectively in CLOP. She is the enthusiasm to my sort of reality-based, I like to call it, my negative-based orientation. So thanks for starting us off, Adrienne. And what I like about this, the way Gallup talks about this, the way that Sophie talked about hope, is the idea that hope is it's not a static thing, in that it is a noun, yes, but it's also a verb. To hope is to do something, and that it requires action. Hope asks something of us as leaders. Hope is that destination, but with an infusion of action. As some old colleagues of mine used to say, hope is not a strategy. Hope is not a constant state of being. It is the destination and some infusion, some movement towards action. And in fact, I've told some leaders in the past, it's your duty to make hope happen. That in fact, your hope, and for yourself as well, your hope serves as sort of a ceiling. It is very hard for the people under you to have any level of hope if yours is depressed. So bringing your own hope up and bringing up the hope of those of your colleagues that you work with is a leadership responsibility. As I frequently say, are we paying you leadership money? Yes. Well, then you need to accept your leadership responsibility, and you have a responsibility to build your own hope and the hope of the people you work with. And I think that the idea that goals, having collaborative goals and energy right now to make that happen, is probably our driving possibility in this environment. Because the truth is, right now, hope can be a stretch. I think in March there was some "we can do it" going around, and a sense that we can make these transitions, that we can make this work for folks. And the longer the situation goes on and the more dire it gets, the obvious reduction in hope is to be expected. I think people's numbers, there wasn't anybody, I think, who reported anything over kind of a mid-base level 3. That's going to make it really hard for us as an organization, as an institution, to move forward constructively and creatively. So if we're like that now, if we don't work on this deliberately, where are we going to be in September? Where are we going to be in October? We have a responsibility to engage in hope building with our folks, and that involves that. Thinking of it as re-goaling, not just setting goals, but re-goaling. To say, collaborative goal setting may seem like a strange thing to engage in right now. People are paddling furiously to stay level and keep their head above water. But long term, this is absolutely the ticket for where we need to get. People need to have a way, a method to build a destination together to make that object for their hope. We need to be able, as people need to be able as a group, to say, okay, we accept this change that's happened, whether we liked it or not. We accept it. We've made changes. We are different now than when we set our goals. We need to reevaluate our goals and reevaluate what we do and reevaluate what's possible now. What can we do differently? I think one of the things I found most inspirational about President Pines when he was onboarding was his way of talking about, yes, things are bad now, but we have an opportunity together to build the university of the future. I find that kind of compelling. I'd like to know what my part in that is, and I find it motivational and hope building. So that's what I'm engaging in with my folks right now, is how do we design that future and build towards it, and how does that give us hope?
Sophie, do we have time for me to add a little bit more? Yes?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. A couple of things that Laura said triggered some ideas for me. And it goes back to, Sophie, one of the earlier slides where language was brought up, using optimistic language. From the field of appreciative inquiry comes this concept of words create worlds. And that really dovetails, I think, nicely with what we're talking about. So what is it we're choosing to talk about? What are the stories that we're choosing to tell about our present as well as our future? So to be thinking about carefully about your words is important. And the other thing that this reminds me of is the conversations around growth mindset and fixed mindset. So I think hope is an expression of a growth mindset. And one of the phrases that I love that people talk about when they talk about growth mindset is the concept of yet. So instead of saying, I can't do this, or my son says, I can't do math. What I say is, you can't do math yet, Brian. So using the word yet allows you to provide some road forward for you. And I read just the other day, someone said, yet is a word filled with hope. And I thought, oh, I like that. Mm-hmm. So sort of allowing yourself to say, we don't have the answers yet. I'm not sure what it's going to look like yet, but to give yourself that roadway so that you can get to that hopeful place in the future.
So we have, go ahead. Maybe let's get here one more point.
Yeah, I wanted to also reach back to last week when we were talking about stability and about the balance between candor and hope, and how the best leaders have a balance and ability to go back and forth between the two of them, and that people do have a natural tendency towards more pessimism or more optimism. And another concept I think we covered under stability was manage your emotions. That this is the time when managing your own reactions and what you are conveying to folks is paramount, and the way you talk and use language to yourself as well as to other people can set the tone. So that was it.
So I don't know if that was in response to these questions that are in the chat about how to balance hope with false hope in these times, that someone is asking, can we lose credibility and trust when optimism is misplaced? We have so much uncertainty that creating hope almost feels irresponsible.
I'll jump on that first, Laura, then you can chime in. Hopeful messages are not Pollyanna. Hopeful messages are not written by Miss Mary Sunshine. Hopeful messages instead they're serious, and they're straightforward, and they're engaging. So they're an invitation to people to engage in moving forward, moving your organization forward. So it isn't saccharine, it isn't putting sort of the lining on it that isn't real, but it is straightforward. I think this is the candor and hope Laura was talking about, but it's engaging. It's an invitation to be part of making the present as best as it can be, and making the future, making us get to our future, or bringing the future toward us.
I don't actually have anything to add to that. Oh. I think that is a perfect encapsulation of the balance of candor and hope, and the responsibility to marshal your own emotions, but to marshal your resources, and your people are your resources, and to point them at collaboratively discovering a positive future is not a Miss Mary Sunshine Pollyanna view, I think.
So Abby, Heidi, Bonnie, if that answered your question, fabulous. If you have a follow-up question or want to go deeper on that, please feel free to update in the chat. And let's also open it to anyone else who has questions at this point. Please put your questions into the chat.
And I would add, in addition to questions, I would say, share with us, bring the hope. Like, what have you got? What have you been doing? How have you been part of seeing hope happen? That would be really useful for your colleagues and for us.
Oh, that's a good comment.
So we have a comment that says, talking about the effective vaccines brings us hope at this unprecedented time. Yeah, it is a desired future state that there are some pathways that we can see that actually could lead us there. So it fits those criteria from the adult hope scale.
So we just need to keep paddling.
Any other questions or thoughts? Heidi thanks us for the answers that we previously provided, and would just add that there are many employees who feel that they are part of the collaborative discussions that you mentioned. Great.
Oh, not part. Okay.
Not part.
Not part. Well,
Not
then
so
I
great.
took the great away. I was going to say, it doesn't exactly fit with the rating we did at the beginning of the session where we said, how hopeful are your folks? But yeah, maybe they're not feeling part of those collaborative discussions and therefore are on that lower end of the scale of how hopeful are they feeling right now. Bonnie's
really
had some pep talks.
Yeah. Go ahead,
Yeah,
Cindy.
Bonnie's had some pep talks or conversations that require conveying hope at a very individual level. In other words, find pathways to positivity for that particular person, independent of their employment circumstances. Adrienne, were you going to comment on that one?
You know, that's good leadership, is when you recognize that people are individuals. So, you know, you don't just have a group of people that you work with. So it's not one size fits all. So yes, how do you calibrate your message to meet individuals' circumstances, their own fears, what they're bringing into it? How do you, calibrate yourself so that you're really talking with the individual? I think that's so important right now.
Right. Well, it also goes along with strengths too. If you're sharing news with someone who has empathy as a strength, they may have different concerns and different things that will bring them hope than if you're talking to someone who's an achiever as a strength and wants to just find a new, or strategic, who wants to find a new strategy as opposed to really grieving or talking about the impact on relationships and people. So really, even the hope that you provide is tied into what strengths people have.
Very good point. Oh, can I tag on this? Focusing on gratitude and universally applicable strengths. There has been research on this, and I know that this works for me, that when I am feeling hopeless or feeling like I don't have as much hope as I need, one of the things I try to do is how can I show generosity or kindness to someone else? You know, and it's simple things, or it can be, you know, bigger than you want, but I find that gets me out of the place of inaction that hopelessness brings.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for your questions. Thank you for your comments. And thank you for being here. We have a few things we want to say in concluding this, our last session in this series. Oh, but first, even though this is the last session in the series, and we won't be asking you to follow up with us or share with us what accomplishments you have, we do want these sessions to be short, with some real targeted strategies so that you could actually pick something that you might want to put into place. And if you want to take a moment to think about or to chat about one meaningful action that you can take to create hope at work, make your own internal commitment or chat out your intentions for this. Laura, did you want to say a few things?
Sure. Thanks, Sophie. I'm sorry that this is our last in this series. I really enjoyed conversations with folks that I know and folks that we didn't know yet. So thanks so much for joining us. As I've said in these programs, CLOC, Center for Leadership and Organizational Change, is here as your internal organizational support unit. We support planned organizational change. We develop employees, and we provide custom coaching and consulting for your needs. Then I really want to focus now on this question of, are you ready to relaunch successfully? We are thinking about September, October. Is your unit ready? I think it's a reference to, we're thinking about PPE, the protection, personal protection equipment. Adrienne had started saying, well, what about our emotional protection equipment? What about our EPE? What about recognizing where people are right now and where they need to be on opening day and what we need to do to get us all there? So we have developed 3 specific programs for groups, for units, departments, teams, whatever, to get you ready for opening day and beyond. strategic resetting, which really does talk a lot about the goal piece, the collaborative goal setting that Sophie was talking about earlier today. This is for units or teams who might need to refocus. Maybe it's sharpening their focus, maybe it's taking a sideways focus, perhaps shift their goals a little bit. Programs or departments that have a big international focus, or a lot of international students are having to reset right now. Some academic programs are looking at ways to reset. Because what we did in March, sort of screwing around to get everything online, is not the same as adjusting mindsets and ensuring commitment to the new constructs and the new realities. And that is something you absolutely can do and take charge of as part of a organized, planned group conversation and activity. We also have recalibrate and recommit, which has a little bit less of the goal setting and a little bit more of just the goal commitment. Units that need to really settle down, focus beyond the budget cuts to seamless delivery starting August 31st or so. This is a sort of a shorter group process, but with the same ends in mind, giving people a focus and goals, or helping people develop collaboratively their focus and goals for the coming few weeks, for the coming few months. We're not, this is not a time to do long-term strategic planning, because you have no idea what environment you're operating in for September, October, November, December. It is a time to look at where you are and what you need to do short term, what you need to adjust to be successful individually and collectively. Managing change, that's probably for a little bit further down the road, when we all know change is coming, but it's not here yet. And it is helping folks manage individual personal transitions as change is happening around them. And not listed here, but one that we are really encouraging people to invest your time, your folks' time in is looking at strengths and talking about strengths and helping people have a strengths-based focus in this time of turmoil. We're offering Gallup Clifton Strengths sessions. We offer them for individuals. We offer them for teams. It's a great sort of team building activity that has some content to it that you can direct into the future as you're reformatting your goals and direction. So here's our contact information. Here we are on the web. Here is our email, clock@umd.edu. Please give us a shout, and we would love to see. We were built for this moment. This is what we do. We support people and organizations in change, and we are here to help.
Thanks, Laura. I want to just call attention to Bonnie's comment in the chat, because it really does tie together some of the four topics that we've covered thus far. When she says something else that really seems to help is welcoming the difficult conversations and emotions. I may not be able to fix or change anything, but providing listening and warmth goes a long way, as well as harnessing any of my own personal networks or connections or resources for those looking to change their employment situation for any reason. So really that does go into compassion. It goes into that stability of, I may not have answers, but I will always provide my resources and my connections. That's my operating principle. It goes into trust, to have those confidential, honest conversations. And it goes into hope, because as Adrian was saying earlier, being generous and helping others when you're feeling hopeless yourself can really help to turn the situation around. So thank you for that, Bonnie, and thank you all for your comments in the chat today. I will say one more time that you will receive a brief evaluation of this session in the next 48 hours. But as this is the evaluation coming at the end of the series, feel free to comment not just on today's session, but any of the ones that you've attended. And also feel free to comment on any other topics you'd like to see us offer in a format like this one in the future. We are finished with Lead Successfully Through Change, but there are certainly other topics about leading in these times or leading in general that might be useful to you, and we'd love to know what those are. The email with the evaluation will also include a link to the recording for this one, and maybe we'll remind you where the other recordings can be found on our website. And yeah, I think that's the business that we need to take care of. But again, in addition to the business, we just really want to thank you for showing up here in the midst of these challenging times, and we really do hope you continue to lead successfully in these times and to take care of yourselves and your colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us.